Uh, Hello everyone. This is my second attempt at recording this video because there's a last minute change I needed to make to the end. You might be able to guess what it was. It's kind of immaterial now, but I said I wasn't going to be doing this kind of video until the election. Well, that is still mostly true. However, someone ran their mouth. They lied about me and gave me a point to prove. So here I am. A dumb and avoidable situation dragged out the Ada County Republican Central Committee meeting on Thursday, October 3rd of 2024. That was just yesterday as my recording right now, at least for the next few minutes. I need to go to bed. But I'll get to what the situation was in a bit, but Megan Reichle decided to lie about me in debate, saying that a resolution about a much different matter was somehow the same, and that resolution was also 100% completely mine, and so everyone on the side of the issue of a certain side of the issue of the certain moment were hypocrites. Somehow those pieces all mashed together somehow. I'll tell you why that isn't the case. So this, I say this kind of thing a lot because, well, it's kind of true. This story starts a lot farther back than people realize. This story starts in the post-Kempthorne area in Idaho when Butch Otter became the candidate at the center of an increasingly stronger political machine. His first day in office was literally the day of the 2007 Fiesta Bowl. If you are an Idahoan, at least a true one, you know that day exactly. Over the ensuing years and gubernatorial terms, the power was consolidated away from the more conservative factions of the party. I'm glossing over a lot of history because I doubt you have the 3 hours it would it would take to cover all that. In the later in the Ron Paul presidential candidacy and post candidacy eras, the establishment, or sometimes referred to as Otter Pack, became the because of the resource-rich and powerful political action committee pushing Butch Otter and his underlings. Conservatives were fighting back, but it was taking quite a while. A lot of, in that time, a lot of very bad, often hypocritical and just downright oppressive things were done by Butch Otter and that whole faction. Nearing the end of his tenure are things like the 2014 convention situation. It was the Otter Pack faction that had caused the bad things to come out of Ada at that time. That as an example. So by the time it comes around, Butch Otter announces that he's not. I'm going to make sure I'm reading this right. I did notes, of course, like I usually do. So by the time it comes around that Butch Otter is, announcing he's not running again, and endorsing his own chosen successor, a lot of people are left reflecting on exactly how bad the tenure of Butch Otter was. No, I'm not saying that he was some kind of awful dictator. However, in such cases where really bad dictators in the world are often, are caught and put up against some kind of international tribunal, the cases against them are often not necessarily about the totality of their reigns, but rather they are tried for some specific reason, and it's just supposed to be a stand-in for that. So when the bad primary that happened, where the normal guy incident happened, and subsequently a less popular chosen boy actually won the primary, we were already in a not good position. Oh, I need to go to bed. I'm sorry. And just so that everybody is on the same page with what I'm talking about here, this was the 2018 primary. The year will become important in a few different ways here in a moment. The 2018 primary was the confluence of a bunch of different circumstances. Um, Locally, at the Ada County level, there had been a situation where the county chairman had resigned, and a special election was held in January. It was held that January. Ryan Davidson won, but all the existing officers remained. And I've told that story a few times now, but all the existing officers remained, including the secretary, one Miss Reichle. That name will come up again. So, going into the primary that year, support for another Ada County GOP of the time was attempted to be organized. Unfortunately, that secretary candidate was me. I'm going to admit this right now. I was definitely the weak link in all of that, and as a consequence, one Ms. Megan Richley was elected instead of me. So she was definitely around and informed. So here we are at the time in between the primary and the election. The eventual result is not exactly in doubt. Everybody knows that the Republican is definitely going to be elected for governor. During this time, there was more pressure to get something done to express official party disapproval of Butch Otter, and more specifically, some of his actions, because he is on his way out. The convention during this time elects to keep Jonathan Parker as chairman for the state party. His story is a whole other side story, and it is not a happy one either. I'm just mentioning his name for a specific reason, which will come up later here. So, election night 2018 happens, and a lot of the stuff is also around the time where things for the 2019 winter meetings are being organized and dealt with. This is also around the time that I and another District 17 PC at the time, one Edward Dinninger, are advancing a resolution through our district committee to censure Butch Otter about a very specific set of circumstances. You see, during this whole 2018 primary cycle was a situation brewing in its own right. I'm jumping back and forward. I'm sorry, but this is just how I wrote it down. This is how it got organized in my brain. I'm sorry. But there was a situation brewing in its own right where there was one Tom Lurcher, a noted Butch Otter devotee, known member of the Otter Pack crowd, and known oppressor to the rights of everyday Idahoans. Because I'm not spelling that out too many more times. Again, when I type this in my notes, I will just simply refer to him as the man before Chad Christensen. He was known to obstruct a lot of good faith bills going through the state house, especially ones having to do with gun rights or just general conservative principles at all. Chad Christensen, out in District 32, ran against him in the primary and won, and did so quite handily. Just so that the point is hammered home here, Chad Christensen put in the work to overwhelmingly defeat an incumbent. Just so that the point is made here. He defeated an incumbent who had lost my place. He defeated an incumbent who had a much bigger pool of resources and support network. So the primary and convention happened, and because I keep losing my place, I'm very sorry. So the primary and convention happen, and it becomes apparent that the man before Chad Christensen is running for the same seat, and doing so as an independent write-in candidate. We didn't think this was possible because one is supposed to just lose a primary and then not move on to the general election. However, because that candidacy was apparently legitimate, Chad Christensen was again running against that man. However, the Republican Party was definitely supposed to be in favor and working towards the election of Chad Christensen. Butch Otter decided to throw a lot of his campaign resources and money at the man before Chad Christensen. And this next detail is why I was mentioning Jonathan Parker at all. We would come to find out later that Butch Otter was definitely trying to lean on and manipulate Jonathan Parker into using state party resources in favor of Chad Christensen's opponent. Butch Otter literally tried to subvert the will of the primary voters. Chairman Parker never actually went for this, and I guess good on him for that. It should also be mentioned here that the man before Chad Christensen was still using the GOP logo on all of his signs. Butch Otter was referring to him as the real... he was literally referring to him as the real Republican in that race. That's a quote. And was doing everything in his power to deceive voters about the party affiliation implications. In fact, getting Butch Otter to admit that Mr. Lurcher had lost the primary was like pulling teeth. So by that time, the general election, the 2018 general election had come around. A lot of us are really pissed. Now, just for the record, Chad Christensen won in November, fair and square, and with commiserate numbers. However, Chad Christensen's campaign would have been a lot easier and simpler had Butch Otter not been trying to elect his write-in opponent. So this is the situation that the resolution advances, the resolution that year advances in, and what it was about. It was actually a little bit more honest about what it was about, in fact. That whole 2019 winter meeting in and of itself is a whole story. The relevant part of it, however, is the second day of the winter meeting where that resolution is debated on and passed. This is also the very day that Butch Otter's chosen successor, Brad Little, is sworn in, meaning that was Butch Otter's last day as governor. So this timing was important. It is important to note here that the debate on that resolution had some opposition in which they never actually argued against the resolution itself, but more rather tried to refer to a very nebulous body of goodwill and how much Butch Otter did for our state and our party. People on the state central committee didn't go for this, and the resolution passed quite handily. Now, I'm going to make sure OBS is still working properly here. I've been recording for almost 14 minutes, so I'm going to see if I can pull up the right... Am I still... Okay, cool. So this is the... Yeah, it is. So this is the resolution of the time. And just so that I am not misleading anyone here. Proposed Resolution 2019 P5, resolution condemning C.L. Butch Otter and Thomas Lurcher. Okay, now, just so that, and I bet Megan Reichle was gonna try to use this stuff up here to kind of obfuscate and distract the true authorship and how that came to be. I dropped something below my seat, and I am trying to find it in the dark. And it doesn't look like I'm going to find it. I'm very sorry. One second here. I should press pause, but okay, here we are. Very sorry. So, this was technically submitted by David DeHaas because he was D17 chair at the time. I was vice chair and a few other duties at the time, but really this was a collaboration of myself and Edward Dinninger. There was a version of this that it was written specifically 100% by me, and to use someone else's word, these words are not mine, to use these words, that version was a lot more hardcore. Maybe we'll have enough time in a video to elaborate on what the heck I just meant there. But anyway, so reading this resolution, whereas, geez, that scroll wheel is just murder here. I'm going to have to use the arrow keys. Okay, so, whereas Chad Christensen and Rep. Tom Lurcher competed for the party's nomination for the Idaho House of Reps, blah, 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 and the Republican primary held on that date. Whereas Chad Christensen defeated Tom Lurcher by winning a majority of the votes cast in both the primary election and general, despite Lurcher's incumbency, and the results were certified by the Idaho Secretary of State. Whereas Chad Christensen's victory in both the primary and general largely can be attributed to, oh yeah, we had to do a last-minute edit about the primary and general, because most of this, of course, had been disposed of before the actual election, but, you know, events influence each other as the time goes on, so we had to put "and general" in there. But anyway, can largely be attributed to voter dissatisfaction with Thomas Lurcher's use, well, I was going to say abuse, but that was a whole argument, abuse of his position to block popular bills from receiving a hearing in the House, especially bills related to firearms. Whereas Tom Lurcher filed a declaration for write-in candidacy for the seat, and Butch Otter chose to endorse that campaign. Whereas this endorsement by one of the party's most visible figures caused great confusion among Republicans and others about where the party stands with respect to its nominee in the general election. I bet this is where Megan Reichle was going to put most of her argument, and you'll see why this is not exactly that's not exactly a good idea here in a moment, I bet, but here. Yeah, continuing on. In fact, during the last election cycle, Chad Christensen received the unequivocal endorsement of Brad Little, Janice McGinn, Jonathan Parker, Brent Crane, and numerous other Idaho Republican Party staff members, office holders, candidates, and committees. And whereas Butch Otter's endorsement of an incumbent write-in candidate over the party's duly nominated candidate was wholly inappropriate, casts a dark shadow on Governor Otter's tenure of service, and is not in keeping with our values as a party. And whereas after being rightly called out and condemned for such behavior, Butch Otter continued his insults to the Republican voters and workers by donating substantial amount of resources to the decidedly un-Republican write-in campaign of Thomas Lurcher. Therefore, be it resolved that the Idaho Republican Party condemns and censures Governor C.L. Butch Otter for his endorsement of Thomas Lurcher's write-in candidacy, and therefore be it resolved that a copy of his resolution shall... Okay, now this last thing is just a bit of procedure. I don't think this thing is actually necessary for modern resolutions anymore, but whatever. So that's that resolution. I'm gonna transition back to the webcam and keep talking. So, I read the resolution there. Now, why the two situations are different. Calling out Butch Otter for going against the will of District 32's electorate is not the same as a factional disagreement over Matthew Clifford. The situation that came to a head at the October 3rd meeting of 2024, in case it's not obvious, but with situation came to a head with a much different situation, both in how it started, how it came up to the relevant deliberative body. I don't think I'm oversimplifying the situation when I just skip forward in the timeline to where Matthew Clifford puts a bit of text on his campaign website. By this point, he is sheriff of Ada County and the incumbent Republican primary nominee. He won that. In recent years, the Ada County GOP's good name had been pillaged and violated in the name of related endorsement matters, I guess I'll just say. to the point where a lot of us are becoming very defensive of using the good name of the party and actually having a discussion and vote about any of our endorsements. We're pretty sensitive about that kind of thing. You should be doing that. Somewhere along the line, somebody notices a bit of text on Matthew Clifford's campaign website that claims that the Ada County Republican Central Committee itself has specifically endorsed Matthew Clifford for sheriff. Bit of a splitting hair thing, but of course, no vote had happened up to that point. This part of the story is why I say in private conversations that both sides of the issue were wrong. Also, yes, I do fight, and I do in fact pride myself on saying both sides of an issue are wrong at times, largely because the situation likely calls for it. The correction or removal of the text on Matthew Clifford's campaign website definitely could have been handled better by the more conservative factions. However, since the more conservative people in this county definitely do not like Matthew Clifford as sheriff, and there's a whole other story about that, people were approaching this issue coming in hot. The other side of the issue definitely did not react well either. So now we have a situation where people are actually being pretty awful to each other in the background about all of this. So Ada County Republican Central Committee is effectively blindsided about this whole thing that had stayed in the background, and certain word had been given that it would largely stay in the background until the website was properly taken care of. So the committee the committee suddenly has before it a resolution that basically says the primary happened, and therefore we should all endorse all Republican county candidates. Now, because people are still committed to being pretty awful to each other, it does not take long for it to come out and debate what this resolution really is about. It's about the Matthew Clifford endorsement thing. This is where Megan Reichle decides to falsely equate the condemnation and censure of Butch Otter with the endorsement situation of Ada County in 2024. No resources had ever been used, nor money spent for that matter, substantively against Matthew Clifford. He and his supporters were just upset that people were endorsing somebody else online. I don't think I'm out of line when I say that. That is exactly what was happening. But anyway, that opponent, which Clifford's people were upset about, had never really identified himself as a Republican, as the Republican nominee, in that situation, nor as a Republican at all, for that matter. He definitely wasn't using the GOP logo. He definitely didn't have a powerful political machine referring to him as the real Republican. Absolutely nobody was trying to pull a fast one on the electorate. Quite the opposite, in fact. Megan Reichle chooses to falsely malign myself and others when she raises that false point. However, members of that committee are completely free to support whoever they individually want for sheriff or for any office for that matter. That was never even the issue with the resolution in 2018. It was a completely different issue. Megan Reichle was definitely around for both situations and definitely knew better. She definitely tried to imply that I had somehow also lied about that situation too. She never elaborated on that. And since I didn't have standing to speak in that situation, nobody had thought to challenge her on this. She was free to impugn my motives, effectively. Unjustly, I will maintain. However, I will make sure that is a mistake in the long run. Don't ever give me a point to prove. So, one resolution was a censure and condemnation, and the other was an outright blanket endorsement. One is where resources and money were already used, and another was none of that in any real way by the party. One was about someone who lost a primary. The other was about the views of what should happen when one wins a primary. One was a resolution after an election. The other was one was right before. One was a situation where a public official was acting inappropriately, sometimes in an official capacity. The other was quite literally none of that. One was a resolution by Edward Dinninger and myself, and the other, well, I'm not even sure who the author was. They never said. Now, just so that I am not unjustly accused of misinforming everyone on what this year's resolution, well, here it is. Because I just received it. I was about to go buy a piece of paper and a camera, but I just received it, so I'm gonna see if I can transition over. Okay, so it's on the screen now. It should be. I've been recording for about 26 minutes now. Resolution of the Ada County Republican Parliament endorsing blah 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 blah. Okay, bad title. That's just a bad title. You need to either shorten it or make it, just make it better to listen to or to read. Bad title. Whereas nearly 48,000 Republicans voters participated in the Ada County GOP primary, demonstrating robust engagement. Really robust engagement with that primary as okay, whatever. A commitment to the selection of qualified candidates for public office, and whereas following Republican candidates for office were duly selected by the Republican voters of Ada County, and I'm receiving an unrelated email right now, so I'm going to continue. And then they just list out the candidates who won and by how much. I don't think it was entirely wise for that faction to say that Tom Daley only won a plurality and not a majority with the 37.8% there, but blah, blah, blah. Sheriff Matthew Clifford received 100% of the Republican vote. Okay, everybody knows when it's 100%, that means something else entirely, and that particular something else does not actually support your argument here. But let's continue. Whereas the same Republican voters who selected these candidates are the ones who elected the blah, 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 blah. That's not the point you think you're making there, but okay, well, continuing on. True patriotism demands principled partisanship. Well, no, it demands principles. You might want to leave the partisanship out of it a lot of the time, because sometimes those things are at odds. You ever read anything by George Washington, his speeches? But anyway, voters trust the Republican Party to champion the candidates. Well, I would say very often not. And there's a few examples I could go about. Some, a lot of the times you are trusted not to necessarily get behind a candidate, but rather to uphold the values and platform of the party. Because you'll get more respect from the voters about that. The way the party communicates and acts and shapes how. Okay, I like how this this 1, 2, 3, fourth whereas clause here is implying something that never actually happened with the Matthew Clifford thing. No party support had ever been put behind his opponent. And the reason why I had very, very well suspected this until that meeting, and that meeting in and of itself was a confirmation, because people would have definitely drug out all of the bits of material support by the party to the other candidate had it actually happened. It would have 100% happened, because that would have been findable really easy. And because it wasn't shown, it does not exist. I'm fairly certain of that, because that kind of detail would be way too juicy for people to pass up. And it's not like that kind of thing was hidden, because how the hell do you even hide that? But anyway, but unity and strength within the Republican Party are essential to ensure the successful election. Well, that's not the argument that you think you're making here, because if that is the case, then maybe you should have dropped the whole Matthew Clifford thing. But anyway, therefore be it resolved that I hereby formally endorses, and then all of that. So now there has been a vote, and so now you've solved the issue that you caused in the first place, Mr. Clifford. Be it further resolved that the candidate will work diligently to promote the election of these candidates and ensure that the will of the Republican voters is respected. Well, you know, what do you think is going to happen next when Matthew Clifford continues to behave like he has and a whole electoral term happens? There's going to be a lot more evidence. There's going to be fewer voters to support, and it's going to look really bad on the party if they have to endorse him again. But yeah, that's the whole resolution right there. Just so that it is made clear that, you know, I'm not hiding what was actually in there, because I know somebody was going to accuse me of it. Somebody might even accuse me of it anyway. But here we are. So I'm just going back to my notes. That is the end of my notes. So I have now demonstrated why Megan Reichle was wrong, why she knew better, and what the situation actually was to begin with. I've been recording for about a little over half an hour now. I'm going to stop recording. I'm going to go to bed. I'm probably going to need to take some NyQuil because my brain just isn't turning off when it needs to. Those other videos that I said I'd be doing, I'm still going to be doing them, just either a lot closer to the election or right after. Probably after. Y'all have a good night. Blessings.